Hey all, I'm so glad to be back here with you. We have another good one. This is How to Speak Nebraskan. Okay, I'm excited for this next interview. This is my first time interviewing someone who is a little bit of a local celebrity here in Lincoln and across the state. I reached out to Jon Vanderford of 1011 News, and he actually said yes when I asked if he'd be willing to do an interview. So I was super excited. I think it's only fitting because Jon sums up what I believe it means to be a great Nebraskan. He's the executive producer and anchor for Pure Nebraska, and which is a daily show on 1011 that features local stories all across the state, and highlights many different people doing different things in various communities, who are just doing great things in different parts of Nebraska. He's a Nebraska native. Growing up in Murdoch, he went to UNL, then he worked in various news outlets before returning to be an anchor in 2003 for 1011, and has become well known to so many folks here in this great state. And I'm so excited to learn more about his journey and his path as a journalist, and just kind of hear some stories from him. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jon Vanderford. Jon, how are you doing?
Great. How are you today?
I'm good. So glad to have you here. So, hey, so just to start off, so as I said here in the beginning, you're a well-known person here in Lincoln and across Nebraska. Do you have a lot of people just kind of come up to you and say hello and talk to you in random places? I just got to start
Well,
with that.
yeah, no, that's a good question. I do have that. And it's really, I always think that's good. If people didn't come up and say hi to me, like I was at Super Saver the other day and somebody came up and said hello, or I'll be, almost anywhere and people will, I know, and this is kind of a Nebraska thing. You know how it is where you might see somebody who's a little famous. I remember, this is a story. I remember Mel Maines. I don't know if you remember Mel.
I remember the name.
He was an anchor here many years ago. As older folks would remember him, he was kind of like the anchor at KOLN for many years. And I remember as a kid, I saw him coming out of a hospital, or it was maybe a department store or something. And I was like, oh, that's Mel Maines. But you don't say anything to them. You just kind of act like you didn't see him. You kind of act like, oh, I don't want to bother them. And I do get that feeling, sometimes when I'm out and about, people will see me, I think, but they don't want to, bother me or bother my privacy or whatever. So they just kind of keep moving on. So, but there are some people who will just come up and say hi, and I love that too. So, I have no problem with people coming up and saying hi because that tells me that people are watching. And if nobody said anything, I'd be worried. So, I
Right. Yeah,
good.
I get that. Well, so kind of on sort of on that same vein, so this is actually your and my second time meeting. So when I reached out to you, I emailed you. And so you and I actually first met 2 years ago in Scottsbluff. Around this time, it was in March. I was there for a work thing, staying at the Fairfield Inn, and I had
Yeah,
I had
okay.
gone out to dinner, and I remember coming back one night, or the evening I was there, and I was by the elevators on the first floor. And in walks you with your family, and I think with spring break, you even had your kids there. And I think you and your wife were getting ready to do a Pure Nebraska episode. We ended up talking for a few minutes. Do you vaguely remember that a little bit?
Yes, I totally remember that because I always loved going out to Scottsbluff, and I remember going to the Fairfield Inn. We always would stay there, and yep, I remember that.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. So I would imagine it was kind of one of those moments too, and I could tell I really appreciated you were so gracious. It was enjoyable to visit with you, and then also it was kind of late, so there was a point at which in my head I'm like I need to just let them go so they can they can kind of get in for the night and go to bed and everything. So
That's always the hard thing, kind of like ending the conversation because it could go on forever, but yeah. No, it
right.
was fun meeting you there, and I remember that.
Yeah, great. So now just to kind of back up a little bit. So you grew up in Murdoch and then Murdoch, Nebraska, and then you came to UNL to study journalism. So how starting off early on the early days, how did you decide to go into journalism and broadcasting?
Well, I was one of those people. that never really knew what they wanted to do totally. I love to do all sorts of things. I was always the one who was a little bit envious of someone who knew exactly what they were going to do when they went into college. I had a roommate, and he was going to be a composition major in music. And he just knew that's what he wanted to do. And I was always kind of envious, like he knew his path. And I never really knew that totally, because I love to do all sorts of things. I went to a small school. It was a D2 school, Murdoch
Yep.
High. And, I think a lot of people can relate to when you go to a school like that, you really have to do everything. You do sports, you do music, you do theater, you do speech, you do everything. And so, in a way, it really gave me an opportunity to experience all that, because there's no way I was going to be playing football anywhere except Murdoch, probably, because I was only 160 pounds at the time, and here I was playing center. And so, that's those are those great memories, though. I love growing up in Murdoch. I love growing up in a small town. But anyway, I did know that I like speech and I like theater and I like kind of current events, and I I knew I wanted to be on the radio. That was one thing I wanted to do. So when I got into
Okay.
college, um, I ended up being on a station called B104, and it used to be on South 27th Street in Old Cheney. It was on the corner, and it was in an old insurance building, and the windows faced the road. And I always thought that was cool because you'd be on the air and you'd be kind of like right there, and you could see everything. Um, the interesting part about that was sometimes you were kind of exposed. I felt like, being on the radio, I had a viewer who would call me occasionally. And, she said one night, I was working overnight. You work overnight when you're in college.
Yeah.
And I had a viewer call me, and she's like, "Hey, you've been so nice to me, talking to me on the phone and stuff." And, I would talk to people in between songs. And she's like, "I'm going to send you dinner. I'm going to send you a meal." And I'm like, "Oh, sure. Yeah, whatever. That's fine." Well, anyway, a taxi rolls up about 45 minutes later, and they give me like this salad and this spaghetti dinner, meatballs, everything comes
Really?
through the window of the
Wow.
station there. And I'm thinking, should I really eat this? Is
Right.
this,
Yeah.
and I did, and it was great.
Yeah.
But anyway, I ended up being on the radio. And then I kind of then eventually, well, to back up, I went into college thinking I might do something in the medical field. And
Okay.
I quickly found out that that wasn't really my bag. Chemistry wasn't really my thing. And so I ended up, got into radio and then realized maybe broadcasting was going to be something I would want to do. And so I ended up going to the broadcasting college and talked to Rick Alloway, who is a
Oh yeah,
professor
I know
there.
Rick. Uh-huh.
I think everybody does. I
Yeah,
mean,
I know. It's hard not to know him.
he is such a great mentor to many people. And anyway, he was great and made me feel at home. And I ended up getting into that, and then that's it. Then I was in that line of classes. And then I got a job internship here at 1011, and I worked here for a while. So that's kind of how it happened, is that I started out
Okay.
radio, made the transition into TV, and then went from there.
Okay. Great. So 10, 11, I mean, I would imagine the interns there, I mean, that must have been crazy. Is that like the whole early morning shift when you did that as an intern or
Yeah,
the weird hours?
well, that was the nice thing too, because although it's that way a little bit now, then you could pick up a camera, you could go shoot video. I even had, a few live shots that I was able to get, working as an intern here. And then that really helped me put a resume tape together. At the time, that was at that time where you had to put a tape
Oh,
together.
right, right.
It wasn't digital. You put a resume tape together, and then you'd shop your resume tape around to stations and I hope you get a job. And I actually went down to St. Joe, Missouri, and that was my first job. I came back to 1011, which was kind of interesting. 1011 has always kind of been in my world, I guess. And then I went down to Knoxville, Tennessee. That was for about 7 years, and I worked there. And then I came back to 1011 one more time, and I was the
Okay.
evening anchor here for a while. And then things happened where they wanted us to do the morning show. Um, and then my wife ended up being my co-anchor on the morning show. And that didn't last too long because we had kids at home
Right.
and it was really hard to get up early, man. We had to get up at like 3 in the morning. And then, the kids, it was hard to go to bed at night and it was just a hard shift.
I
And
bet.
then they started the 4 p.m. news and we started doing that shift and that was so much better. So I ended up doing the noon and the four, but then my general manager at the time, he was looking for a program. I think they were looking to sort of minimize syndicated programming and maybe come up with local product that they could put on the air. And so I ended up pitching the idea of doing Pure Nebraska. I'd always had this idea of doing the show because, as I talked about here a little bit ago, I grew up in a small town and
Yeah.
I always loved it. I loved the town. I loved the people. I loved that lifestyle. And then being here or working in television, I always noticed that seemed like the only time that maybe we went to a small town was, maybe if something bad happened. And I
Okay.
wanted to go there and I always thought we should show things that are great about our small communities. And so I just developed this show and wanted to do that. And the general manager at that time, he agreed to it. And I was like, wow, this is great. So we started off doing it. I didn't ever think that it would get this far because it started off on a Tuesday afternoon. It was right after the noon show at 12:30 p.m. on our My TV station, our Meet TV station. And I just didn't think anybody would tune in at that time. Um, but they did. And
Great.
so then they moved us to the morning show they moved us to mornings on Sundays, and they felt like it was a good lead in into CBS Sunday Morning. And
Okay.
so that worked. And then I think the ball just started rolling, and people just started finding it, and they kind of liked it. And I don't know, I'm just so thankful that people like the show. I'm just thankful, and
Yeah.
it's been really a lot of fun.
And so, yeah, because I was going to ask, I noticed it's kind of changed a little over the years. So, how often is it on currently?
Yeah, so right now it's on 7:30 on Sunday mornings, 7:30 a.m. to 8 a.m. on Sunday mornings. And then it is on for an hour now, from 9 to 10 a.m. weekdays, Monday through Friday. And
Wow.
originally it started out as 7:30 a.m. on Sunday morning, 7:30 to 8. Originally, as I mentioned, it was on MeTV on Tuesdays. Then it moved to Sunday mornings. Well, then we had a news general manager who thought maybe it could be an hour long during the week. And then I didn't know if it could be done, with the amount of
Right?
stuff.
It's a lot of content you have to come up with.
Yeah, it's a lot of content. And then, as you know, Nebraska, it's a pretty big state when you start getting out there,
Absolutely.
start driving around. There's a lot of ground to cover. And so I was like, well, let's try. I that's one of my feelings about life is like, let's try it.
Right.
You just gotta try it, see what happens. And so we did, and then people really liked the hour-long show. And one of the keys, I think, to the hour-long show, and really the show in general, has been, I think the content is number one. People love it when we go to a small town somewhere where maybe they would never go to and show them something unique there. That is kind of the number one thing. But I also think that Taryn, my wife and co-anchor, and then Brad Anderson, who is
Yeah.
rather the meteorologist,
He's a
they
hoot, by the way. He just cracks me up. He's so funny.
he's so funny, but he's very talented, I think, not only in doing the weather, but he does have that sensibility of, you know, bringing things out of people when he does interviews with them. His interviews are always entertaining. Taryn is the same way. They know how to interview people. So those two have really made the show too. Yeah, I am kind of the I guess the executive producer and the host, and I go out and I shoot a lot of the stories, if not all of them. I shoot nearly all of them. I edit them, I put it all together. So a lot of people are kind of amazed that everything you see on Pure Nebraska really has been done by me, but Taryn and Brad really play a big role in, making it happen and stuff, and making the interviews interesting, and just their personalities really make the show work. And so I'm
Yeah.
thankful for that. We just well, I'm going to back up a little bit because you asked the what happened, the evolution of the show.
Yeah.
We were an hour. Then we went back to a half hour because I think at the time they just felt like things had changed, staffing had changed, and they felt like maybe a half hour was really more appropriate for me in terms of being able to cover things. And that was good for me, but the viewers really were kind of like, they kind of wanted the hour.
Oh,
And
really? Okay.
so we went for a while for the half hour again, but then back in September, we moved back to doing an hour again. So we're back to the hour format.
That's great. I mean, I can only imagine just going from a show that you initially pitched this idea. It starts as this once a week sort of thing, and you're excited that it's working, but then switching it to where you're doing it 6 days a week. I mean, that's a big jump from one day a
It,
week to 6 days a week.
it really is. It really is. And no, there's a lot of nuances to it. That one of the things I've tried to do to make it easier, there are ways you can do stories. If you watch news a lot, if you're a person,
Yeah.
you'll see the people interviewed, but then the reporter does like kind of a voice track, and then there's sound bites, and there's voice track, and they edit it all together, and they make sort of a story that way.
Yeah.
But I guess I try to do it where we go out and maybe I'm on camera with a person and we're doing sort of a conversation a little bit more on camera. And then I edit it down. Like we'll talk for maybe 9 or 10 minutes in the field, and then I'll edit it down to maybe about 3 minutes. And that it sounds like it's a lot of work, but I think it's a little easier to do that than putting together sort of a news style pack, which is what I call it. It's sort of a news style format, or you can do it my way, which is kind of a quasi live sort of format. And I do it that way to save time and to gather more content. Really, that's
Yeah.
kind of what I'm doing, is trying to like, it gives me when we go out on shoots, um, let's say we go out to, like you mentioned, Scotts Bluff.
Yeah.
Let's say we go there. I usually try to do a 3-day shoot, and maybe I'll shoot in Ogallala and Llewellyn, maybe Thedford one day. And then maybe the next day I'll go to Gering and Scotts Bluff. And then maybe the next day I'll go down to Kimball and Potter and those areas, and kind of like and the goal then is to kind of maybe shoot about, I'm happy if I can get like 18 stories, maybe 18 or
Oh,
19 stories
wow.
in a 3-day shoot. And
Okay.
when I
That's
was
a lot of
telling
work.
you, it's a lot of work. So we'll try to do like 5 or 6 stories in a day. But the format I was telling you about, that really helps us do it faster. Because if you were doing it the news style way, you'd have to, I don't know, you have to get 3 or 4 interviews in a row, and then you got to like piece that all together later. And in this way, we're getting one interview with a local expert, and they can say everything that 3 or 4 people would do, and we're just saving time. But I think it all looks good in the end.
Right. So, do you keep track of how many miles you drive by chance? I'm just curious. Like, you must drive between you, well, and especially, what I mean is both you and like your team, right? I mean, do you keep track of those miles? How is that each year? How many trips do you make out? I mean, I shouldn't say to Western Nebraska because you're all over the state. You're in Northeast, Southeast, North Central, South Central. I mean, you're in all different parts of the state. I mean, how many like estimated trips are you taking? Miles are you driving? Do you ever keep track of that stuff or kind of know?
I wish I had. I wish I had. I don't. I used to have. There's a friend of mine that used to work here, and he would always keep track of pins. He'd put pins on a map, of the state, and he would keep track of where he went. I have not done that. I guess I've been so busy that I just have never done it. And I don't really know how many miles. I do know that my news vehicle has 245,000 miles on it,
Oh, wow. That's
and I keep
impressive.
I keep driving it. I'm still driving it, and it's a great car. So, and I've been everywhere in the state with it, and I hope it keeps going. I don't know if it's going to make it that far, but I'd like to get it to 300,000. Maybe that would be
Well, you
my
know what? If it ever, well, here's the deal. I guess I hope it never breaks down in the middle of nowhere. But if it does, maybe you can do a story about how you have to get yourself saved, right?
I've always wanted to do a promo, like a news, like a promo is, if you're watching other shows on 10/11 during the evening or something, and there's like a little 30-second spot that comes on and highlights pure Nebraska or news. We call that like a promo. And I always thought it would be fun to do something like that where you know, my car broke down in the Sand Hills, or my other idea I wish I could do, and I think it would take too much coordination, but I'd like to, like, there'd be a tight shot of me on the phone, and I'm calling Brad or I'm calling Taryn, and I'm saying, "Hey, you guys, I'm stuck in traffic. I'm in the Sand Hills. I'm in a traffic jam right now, and I'm not going to make it to where I'm supposed to go." Um, and then they kind of widen out, and then you see like the cattle drive. You see like this
Oh,
huge
nice.
cattle drive, and there's these black Angus cattle going across the road, and the cowboys are driving them, and there's my little car sitting there waiting for the traffic to get
Right.
off the road. And I always thought that'd be a funny
That would be.
promo.
That would
But
be fun. I
I've
still
got to
remember.
find a
Yeah.
yeah, I've got
Go
to
ahead.
find a rancher who'd be willing to take his time to
Right.
set something like that up. So,
Yeah, branding season, right? Maybe in the fall you can go out and do that. I still remember a
right.
promo ad you did,
Yeah,
you
right.
and Taryn and Brad too, and kind of pointing to like where do we go next and all of that. And I remember a tanking ad, like you were something like tanking or something,
Yep.
for the stories. So yeah, you've covered it all. Are there stories that stick out to you? I mean, I would imagine that there's probably just so many that kind of flood your mind. I would imagine, but you cover what I also love about Pure Nebraska, and I appreciate you really saying that it's a chance for you to go into these communities and highlight the good things that are happening and the people that are doing positive things in their communities across the state. When you are there any things that kind of stick out to you because you highlight culture, you highlight history, you highlight. I feel like I watched a bunch of your, I've watched it, and then I went to your website. 1011, of course, has Pure Nebraska, all these stories, so folks check it out. And I feel like I'm learning a lot of history about Nebraska. Is there anything that sticks out to you? Some stories you've done?
Oh my gosh. I mean, there's so many that stand out. I really struggle with, people will ask me, what's your favorite story that you've ever done? And I don't know. And I think part of the problem is that there's so much content that we are trying to gather weekly that sometimes I forget some of the really good ones. I don't know. This is one that comes to mind just because it's unique. Um, there is a land formation called Old Baldy, and it was written about by Lewis and Clark in their journals. And it's up by Lynch. And you go north of Lynch a little ways, and it's right on the Missouri River. And it's this land formation that Lewis and Clark wrote about, and
Wow.
they stood on. They were right there, and I believe they actually found a type of prairie dog there, and they actually took a prairie dog as a specimen and took it with them.
Wow.
But anyway, you can't really get to it. It's on private land. So I asked if I could, and there was a guy that helped me go to it. And I was able to climb up on top of Old Baldy, and you're standing there and you're seeing like three states. You're kind of on the South Dakota, Iowa, Nebraska. You see all of it right there, and you
Oh,
see
wow.
the old Missouri River, maybe kind of the way Lewis and Clark might have seen it a little bit more. And I just thought that was really cool. Just
Yeah.
standing there in the footsteps of those guys, you know, that was really kind of a cool thing. Now, that's kind of on the border of the states. So, I'm trying to think of some cool things that we've done, like right in the heart of the state. I mean, I'd have to probably think about
Yeah.
that a little bit. I do, I do love the area around Ord, Burwell, Scotia. That's kind of a neat area. They've got Fort Hartsuff there. There's some neat things there. I love the Sand Hills. I love the Pine Ridge. I will say that the Niobrara is probably one of my favorite areas, the river there. We that probably was kind of a fun trip because I always wanted to do a story on canoeing on the Niobrara,
Oh,
and
cool.
Taryn, Brad, and I went up there, and I was kind of the camera person, and I put Brad and Taryn in the canoe, and I wanted them to be my subject matter, and I don't know if Brad had been in a canoe much, and I don't know if I think he was a little concerned, a little nervous about it, like what to expect. And I think a lot of people, you're talking about a river that can be a little scary, but for me, the Niobrara is not scary because I know there's holes, there's probably places where you could slip in.
Right.
But for the most part, you can kind of stand up in the
Right.
in the Niobrara, which makes it so cool. And anyway, Brad, I don't know if he knew that 100%, but going in, but I think he, realized that it's not that bad. But it was really fun to see those guys trying to go down the Niobrara River. I loved it, and
I would
they
imagine.
tried to stop, and I don't think, Brad wasn't 100% sure how to stop the canoe, so he was kind of reaching over and trying to grab weeds along the riverbank, and the weeds were breaking. It just kept going. They finally stopped, of course, but the Niobrara was really a fun shoot, and uh,
I think that was from a couple years ago. I actually think I do think I saw that story actually, or at least
yeah,
maybe you made a previews for it or
I'm
something.
sure
That
you
kind of
saw that. We had
rings a
that in a
bell.
promo. Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. So I mean, what is your favorite part about doing that show, about doing Pure Nebraska?
Um,
And now, time for a short break. Hello, all. I'm so glad you have joined this podcast. You can listen to How to Speak Nebraskan on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, or other streaming services as well. Also, if you want to recommend a person on this show or simply have something you're interested in having me talk about, just message me on my Facebook group, How to Speak Nebraskan, or you can go to my website and submit a note at howtospeaknebraskan.com. Now, back to the episode.
I just love getting out and going to some of the small towns, seeing some of those unique out of the way places that, a lot of people may not see. I've been on some roads that, maybe I'll never be on again. I don't know. It's just great to see that. And, you know, the thing about our state that I love and I think makes the show work is that everybody everybody seems to be on the same page in a way. I think
Mhm.
everybody is proud of their state. Everybody's proud to be a Nebraskan, and you can be in Harrison or you can be in Full City and everywhere in between, and you care about, I've gone to Harrison and people care about what's going on in Lincoln. They care about what's going on the east side of the state.
Mhm.
I've been on the east side of the state and people care about what's going on. Although I will say some people are not that familiar with the western side of the state, and they should get very familiar because it's a really awesome. I mean, I love the Panhandle. I just love the sunlight. I love the feel of it. I love the environment. Just everything about it is cool. So if you ever get a chance and you haven't been to the Panhandle, do it. It's so cool. And the Pine Ridge up by Fort Robinson, that's a really another neat area is Fort Robinson,
Right.
Harrison, and Sioux County. Some of those areas are very different than what you'd expect. And I think one of the things I like too is that I think our state is very diverse. You can kind of be in the cornfields in the eastern part of the state, but then it gets more arid, and then you get to the west. Um, I think Iowa's a cool state. I think every state is cool, but to me, Iowa's it's mostly all farming, where
Mhm.
we get to have farming, we get the ranching, we get the sand hills, we've got the really cool like Scotts Bluff, the Buttes, some of the land formations that are unique.
Yeah.
And so I feel like our state has a lot of neat things in it.
Yeah, you're right. I appreciate you saying that because people don't think of that, but you're right. When you really look at it, our geography, topography of the Nebraska, it is very different. And actually, when you talked about the western part of the state, funny enough, the Scottsbluff trip popped back in my head because I've actually only been out there once. Well, maybe another quick trip, but I didn't really get to do much. And so, with that trip I was talking about 2 years ago, first off, there is something soothing I think about being in that part of the state when there's just less population, less congestion. It's just more open country, and it's beautiful, and it looks different. And one thing that really struck me when I was in Scottsbluff was Chimney Rock gets kind of all the notoriety. It's on our quarter. It's all these things, which is great. I I totally underestimated the Scottsbluff National Monument. I went out there and I'm like, why do we not talk more about this? I went out and hiked and I went for a run and I was like, this place is amazing. And I had not realized that. I had spent the afternoon out there and just absolutely loved it. And I thought, how come no one's ever told me that I should check out the Scottsbluff National Monument?
I know, I agree with you 100%. Because, when you get out there and you start driving up into the canyon area there, you're like, wow, this is really cool. And like you said, when you get out and hike, I know once you get up in there, you get on top of the monument and do some hiking. It's really, yeah, you're right. It's just really a neat area and well worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, kind of backing up a little bit, you were in you would after you were done at UNL as a student, you went to St. Joe. You said you came back briefly to 1011, then went down to Tennessee. So if I read your bio correctly, you did you in St. Joe, were you kind of like a weather forecaster? Is that or a weather person? Is that what you covered sometimes?
Yes, I did. I did. And it was one of those things where St. Joe was, kind of a starter market, they would say. A very small market where people coming right out of college could get their feet wet. And I really enjoyed that opportunity. I mean, and then of course the news director came to me and he said, "Hey, we need somebody to do the Sunday night weather." And I said, "I don't have any experience doing weather. I don't know I'm not a meteorologist." And they were okay with that. They just wanted a weathercaster, somebody to just do the weather. And basically what I did was or what they had me do was that I took weather stuff off of the ABC feed it was an ABC affiliate, and I
Okay.
took some weather stuff off of the feed. And basically I knew enough about weather because growing up, I think everybody who grows up in a small town or maybe a farming community weather is king. And, you kind of lived for watching the 10 o'clock news and seeing what the weather was going to do the next day. And so I grew up watching the weather. And so I kind of knew about cold fronts and warm fronts and highs and lows and all of that. And so then I used my theater background, my speech background, and
Right.
kind of sort of made it up, a little bit, not making it up, but I made it look like I was a weather guy, and it was really fun. I had a blast doing it. I think the weather people have a great job because I think it's a lot of fun.
Well, and
Um,
so I was gonna say what was funny about that was when I saw you did that, I thought, well, and gosh, here you are back at 10, 11, and you had worked there before, and of course, you're kind of like you got Ken Shimmick there. I mean, let's be
yeah.
real. You've got
Right.
like the kind of most probably the most well-known weather person in the state of Nebraska probably ever that's doing the weather. I just gotta ask, did you feel like a little bit of an imposter when you compared yourself to what you had worked with?
Yeah, well, luckily, the only place I ever did weather was at St. Joe, and I was only there for about 6 months. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, and Ken is just, he's a legend. He does such a great job. I mean, he could have probably worked anywhere. And here he is here in our state. And I think that's so cool that he cares about Nebraska and wants to be here. And that's yeah. But you're right though. Yeah, comparing my work to his, yeah, I definitely an imposter.
Yeah. So okay, I'm just a little bit curious. You had done that. And then in Tennessee you were kind of like a reporter and then also an anchor. Did you do like a little bit of both
Yeah,
kind
I
of done
did. I
there?
did. I did a 5 p.m. I anchored a 5 p.m. show in Tennessee, and then they did like a Fox station. Some of these stations would have like they might be an ABC affiliate, but then they were also a Fox station. And so they had a 9 p.m. Fox newscast. And so I did that as well. And yeah, I just got to the point, that was really a great place. I love that too. Kind of going back to my original comment where I love doing things. It's hard for me to kind of like know really what I want to do. So I really liked that as well. But the job part of it, I think, got to a point where I kind of needed to do something new. And so I did happen to have some contacts here at 10, 11, and then moved from Tennessee here. But yeah, no, I did some anchoring, I did some reporting there. Um, and yeah, it was interesting though, because that was on Eastern time. And
Okay.
so the 10 o'clock, I was used to having news on at 10. And of course, that was 11. So you had an extra hour to get your show together. You had an extra hour to like, get your
Right.
story done. So that was nice.
Nice.
But yeah, I was glad to come back.
So just got kind of a few more little questions for you. Now, so one, I would imagine you think about, I think about just kind of your little story you've said in the journey that you've had and everything. I would, everybody, I think when they do a little bit of reflection back on when they've started their career, you kind of remember some of the first time you did certain things, right? The first time you were on TV or the news or whatever. Do you have anything that sticks out to you in terms of some of your first experiences of rather that was in the field reporting or your first time ever on television and what was that feeling like kind of trying to get ready for some of those early experiences that you had?
Oh boy, that's you know, I I think I just wanted to do a good job. That was kind of my thought. I was kind of telling you about Mel Maines. He was kind of this longtime anchor and just kind of this big figurehead here in the newsroom. And I wanted to do a good job and impress him, and it took a long time to kind of do that. But I think he at some point kind of thought I did okay, and that was good. And I do remember going out, and trying to do interviews, and that was scary. Like you'd have to go, here I am, just a college graduate, and I have to go interview like a police captain who's been on the job for 30 years, and has seen everything and done everything.
Hmm.
And I'm the one that's supposed to go interview this person, and that's
Right.
or you go to the state legislature and you interview back in the day, before term limits, there were people there that had been there for years and years and years. And you'd go try to interview these people, and it was kind of intimidating to kind of do that. But I guess that was just my main thought, when I was starting out, was I really wanted to do a good job. I wanted it to be accurate. I wanted it to be clean when it was on the air. That always drove me crazy when, like if a name is spelled wrong,
Right, right.
like you're watching the show, and that, to me, that ruins the whole story. And Taryn
Right.
she always gets mad at me. She's like, yo, don't mope around all day now because one name was wrong. And I always hate that. If like say I got your name wrong, your name comes up on screen and it's like Tom or something, or
Right,
it
right.
got spelled incorrectly, or the E's missing. That just drives me crazy. So I guess I'm a little bit of a stickler for having things sort of accurate and looking clean and looking good. Um, but I guess that's a good thing too. So I don't know if I answered your question on that, because
Yeah, no, I think it's good. I
good.
absolutely. There's a lot to take in, I think, with that. So, okay, I do have to ask one thing. I mean, so obviously Taryn, your wife, she's also well known and well recognizable too, because she does news and has been up here in Nebraska. I do just have to ask, um, there was that point where you would have both been on the news together, and here you are, this married couple that gets this really cool opportunity. But I do just kind of have to ask, you would have had to, I would imagine, kind of negotiate a little bit like, okay, like we're actually going to work together on this very public facing job that we both have where everybody sees us together every day. I mean, did you have to kind of, work together and sort of set some ground rules like, okay, this is how it's going to be when we're sort of like our working lives and our home lives and all that?
Uh, I would say not really. I mean, I don't know. We haven't been that strict about it. I think we've just kind of taken it one day at a time and just tried to make it work. And I think she is a very talented broadcaster. I mean, even in college, before we, dated and that, I thought she was really good. She's got a great voice. She's got a great way of putting stories together. So I have a lot of respect for her in the professional world. And then I'm thankful that she's there to bounce ideas off of each other. And, we try to, she does her own thing here at work, and I kind of do my own thing too. So we don't really bother each other too much. We do try not to talk about it too much at home. I
Yeah.
think sometimes you can go home and, you can commiserate over what happened and commiserate at home, and kind of that's all you talk about. But I don't know. It's just really worked. I'm thankful she does a great job, and we've really not had to really lay a lot of ground rules or anything.
Yeah, no, that's great. I would imagine I to be honest, the thought that went through my head was I pictured almost like a family business in a way. I like when there's a couple, sometimes they run a business together and you just find the rhythm that works for you when you have kind of those different parts of your world that kind of come together and you just kind of find a way to make it work, I would imagine. So,
That is a great point. I mean, sometimes we laugh and, we're like, we're kind of like a farm family,
oh yeah.
we're almost like a dairy producer or something, or, where you're always working together. But, I mean, Taryn's grandparents worked together on the farm. Taryn's parents, my parents were teachers more. But, I think it's not all that unusual for, a couple to kind of work together,
That's true.
have a small business or whatever. So that's kind of, I guess, what we do.
Yeah, that's great. So, okay, I'll get close to wrapping it up here. I really appreciate your time, and this has been so much fun learning more about you and your experiences and everything too. So I just kind of have to ask this general question that, all of us who watch the news and watch your stories and your shows and all that too, what does it take? What do we not see to put a show together on the back end? You got obviously we see the people who are on the TV, but what does the general public maybe not see of what it takes to pull together either a show or like a news broadcast or some variation of that?
Yeah, there is a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. I think people may not really, they may not really know. I mean, and you put in a little more hours than maybe a person should. You'd like it to be an 8 to 5 job, but it usually sometimes ends up being 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. or 6 a.m. to sometimes you're here until 8 p.m. or there's days where you just have to put in a lot more hours. We start out in the morning and we do our show from I get in here pretty early and then I do some editing before the 9 a.m. show. Then the 9 a.m. show is on from 9 to 10. And then and then we
Okay, folks, I need to pause here real quick. Do you hear that man's voice in the background? And do you remember a few minutes ago when I referenced Ken Shimmick, the legendary weatherman? Well, as John and I were getting ready to wrap up the interview, I heard a deep voice in the background, and although it caused a little bit of a distraction, I couldn't help but think, this guy kind of sounds like Ken Shimmick. Well, I checked after the interview with John, and it turns out my instincts were correct. Ken was chatting with somebody in the background. I almost felt bad like we were eavesdropping on his conversation, but you really can't tell what he's making out, and I didn't want to distract John as we were in the final moments of the conversation. But it was so fitting to hear Ken Shimmick in the background. My mission is to probably try to get him on this podcast at some point. Hopefully that'll work out. And now, here's the end of the interview with John and Ken Shimmick chatting in the background.
you know then I spend a lot of time editing, or maybe I'll go out and shoot stories or whatever. So there's really a lot of things that go on behind the scenes. And I'm distracted, Jeff. I'm sorry. I
No,
probably
that's
talked
all
too
right.
long. I'm trying to do another Zoom over here. So,
No worries.
but
No, it's
no,
totally
yeah,
fine.
it takes a lot of work to get things done. I was going to say, Jeff, though, that I wouldn't be anywhere without the station, about having this platform where I'm able to do this. KOLN has been such, KOLN, KGIN, 1011, great TV. They've done such a they've been so gracious to let us do a program about our state and focus on the great things that are going on in the state. And so I'm thankful. I'm thankful to, everybody here behind the scenes, the production crew that, puts us on the air every day. And
Right.
we have a producer now. Katie is her name. She does a great job. And we just recently, she's been on for a while, but Grace McDonald is a reporter for us now on Pure, and she does a great job too, and has the sensibility of, she understands the small town world, I think, and she's doing a great job as well. So I just kind of wanted to say thank you to everybody that kind of puts us on the air every day.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's a really nice way to sum it up. I do just have to actually say, so Grace, I work with her fiance. His name is Scott. I work with him on campus. And he told me he's going to want to make sure he listens to this, so he'll be excited he gets a little shout out. But so anyway, I made a comment to him the other day that I was going to interview you out here on the podcast, and so I was like, "Yeah, I'm Grace works on Pure Nebraska." So
Oh, great. Yeah, and she does a great job. I mean, she couldn't have been a better addition to the team. And now that we're doing an hour show, we need more content than ever. And so it's
yeah,
nice to have her on.
that's wonderful. Well, hey, I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. This has been so much fun learning from you about your experiences and your story and everything like that. And as you said, you're thankful for all the people that put on the show. And that you work with at 1011. That's wonderful. We're thankful for people like you too that bring us these stories and that work so hard to do it and cover these and to get the story right. And we really appreciate it. So thank you so much for being here on this podcast. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. It was an honor to be on.
Awesome. Great. All right. Take care, John.
Thank you.
I still can't help but laugh at Ken Shimmick talking there for those last few minutes. And I also have to just say, it was so fun interviewing Jon Vanderford. Truly a classy guy and someone who we don't just know from doing the news, but also someone who brings Nebraska charm to life with his Pure Nebraska show. I really appreciate everything that he does and goes out and really just finds stories that you never would find unless you really just sought them out. And I love that he does that and brings them to all of us here. I encourage you to check out his show, and plus you can find his library of Pure Nebraska stories at the 1011 website. There's a whole bunch of them listed there. They're a lot of fun to go watch. I promise you will see a lot of stuff that you like. That's all we got for today. It was so great having you join. This is How to Speak Nebraskan.